Hi students, welcome back to class. After a few months of physical classroom, we are again back to virtual class. The situation has changed, so we are forced to be in virtual classes. So start listening to all the recorded lectures, listen carefully, study well. So in this class, I'm going to teach you Allasani Peddana. That is, I'm just going to give you an introduction to Allasani Peddana. I've already taught you entering the Mahabharata by Nannaya. So in this class, I'm going to give you just an introduction. There's a poem by Allasani Peddana, that is The Brahmin Meets the Courtesan. That is the translation of Allasani Peddana's poem. So that is what you have to study in Unit 1, in one part of Unit 1. So before going to the poem, let's try to know more about Allasani Peddana. So before going to Allasani Peddana in detail, I would like to introduce Sri Krishna Devaraya, because Allasani Peddana lived during the period of Sri Krishna Devaraya, and there was a very close connection between Sri Krishna Devaraya and Allasani Peddana. Sri Krishna Devaraya was the patron of Allasani Peddana, so there was a strong bond between them. So Sri Krishna Devaraya, his period was from 1509 to 1529. That was in 16th century. He was the third ruler of the Tuluva dynasty and is considered to be its greatest ruler. He possessed the largest empire in India after the decline of the Delhi Sultanate. Krishnadevaraya earned the titles Kannada Raja Ramana, Lord of the Kannada Empire, Andhra Bhoja, Andhra Scholar King, and Muru Rayaru Ganda, King of Three Kings. So these were actually some of the titles given to Sri Krishna Devaraya. He was an army commander under Saluva Narasimha Devaraya. That was again another ruler of Vijayanagara Empire only. He later took control of the empire to prevent the disintegration of the empire. So there was again a point in history. There was a point of disintegration of Vijayanagara Empire. So it was at that time Sri Krishna Devaraya took the control of Vijayanagara Empire. So he was the one who established the Tuluva dynasty in Vijayanagara Empire. Tuluva dynasty was already there, but he was the one who established this dynasty in Vijayanagara Empire. He was the dominant ruler of the peninsula of India. He defeated the sultans of Bijapur. Bijapur is again Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana border, so those areas. Golconda, you might have seen the Golconda fort. Bahmani Sultanate, they were also sultans. Gajapatis of Odisha, and was one of the most powerful rulers in India. So these were actually the prominent rulers in India towards that, almost in the Deccan area, Deccan Plateau area. So he defeated all these rulers, not just in Deccan Plateau, even above that also. So these were some of the rulers, and he defeated them, and he became the powerful ruler. He was the major ruler in India. Sri Krishna Devaraya wrote a work that was called Amukta Malina. There was a belief that Amukta Malina was written by Allasani Peddana, but no, it was written by Sri Krishna Devaraya only. Some critics try to attribute the authorship of Amukta Malina to Allasani Peddana also. So his main enemies were Bahmani Sultans. I've already shown that in the previous slide. They were actually some rulers divided into. There's small kingdoms. In these small kingdoms, these sultans were ruling. So they were potential enemies to Sri Krishna Devaraya. And the other enemy was Gajapatis of Odisha, towards the eastern coast of India. These Gajapatis of Odisha, they were powerful, and that was the time when the Portuguese also began to rise itself as a great maritime power. So Portuguese had already come to India and they started trade and commerce with India. So they had naval power and they were actually trying to become a powerful maritime power. That means they were trying to become a powerful maritime threat to Sri Krishna Devaraya. And let's try to know more about the literature during this period. That was the golden age of Kannada literature. So when we think about Vijayanagara Empire, we have to think about Vijayanagara Empire located in Karnataka. Don't get confused with the Vijayanagara near Vishakhapatnam. This is a different Vijayanagara Empire only. And so it was again the Hampi area and all. Even now also we can see the ruins of Vijayanagara Empire. So it was again located in Karnataka. So Kannada literature flourished during this period. So it was the golden age of Kannada literature. As he was ruling other subjects also, subjects who belong to other linguistic community, so he promoted the poets in other linguistic communities as well. He promoted Telugu poets, Kannada poets, Sanskrit poets, Tamil poets. So they all actually enjoyed the patronage of the emperor during his period. And he was fluent in many languages. He encouraged, but he knew all these languages also. So he was very fluent in many languages. Because of the fluency in many languages, there was a debate whether he was a Kannadiga or Telugu or Tulugu. So to which linguistic community he belonged. So that was a debate. And we have already seen that he belonged to Tuluva dynasty. So he might have been born to that particular Tuluva linguistic community, so it's not very clear. Let's try to know more about Telugu literature during the period of Sri Krishna Devaraya. And that was the period of peak period of Telugu literature. That means in that period we could see a new literary style, that was Prabandham. So it is Prabandham, this literary style, some fictitious elements were there, and so even some parts of the original stories they were also omitted. So they were actually adding some fictitious elements, and at the same time some parts of the original stories were omitted. So in that way they developed an anecdote into a larger work. So that was the period in which Prabandham, the literary style, gained prominence. So there were three types of Prabandham. One was Prakyatam, the next one Utpadyam, and the third one Misramam. So that was the famous story, purely fictional story, mixed story. Okay? They were the three types of Prabandham in the period. Ashtadigajalu, you might have heard of Ashtadigajalu. So they had written in all the three genres during the Prabandha Yuga. The period of Sri Krishna Devaraya was called Prabandha Yuga. So Ashtadigajalu had the versatility, or the creative genius in writing in all the three genres. So what does Ashtadigajalu mean? Ashtadigajalu. It's again, Ashtadigajalu is a Telugu word only. So it actually means elephants in 8 directions. Ashta, 8, Dik, direction, Gaja, elephant. So elephant in 8 directions. That is the meaning of Ashtadigajalu. So it refers to the old Hindu belief that 8 elephants called Airavada hold the earth in 8 directions. We don't see Airavada in real life. So there is again a mythological creature only, mythological elephant you can find in mythology. So the belief that was that these 8 elephants, they could hold the earth in 8 directions. So it is a symbolic representation of 8 Telugu scholars in his court. So that was a collective title given to the 8 Telugu scholars and poets in the court of Emperor Sri Krishna Devaraya. So these 8 poets were regarded as the 8 pillars of his literary assembly. So these poets could lead the country in a good way kingdom in a good way. That means it could actually hold the kingdom in the 8 directions of the kingdom could be held in a better way, in a good way, by the eminence of this 8 Telugu scholars. Okay, so that was the meaning attributed. So you might have heard of Tenali Raman. So he was one of the scholars of Ashtadivyajalu. Allasani Peddana was a prominent uh, Ashtadivyajalu. Okay? He was one of the prominent members of Ashtadivyajalu. The age of Ashtadivyajalu was called Prabandha age. That was from 1540 AD to 1600 AD. Okay? So almost by the end of that means by the end of the Sri Krishna Devaraya's period. So all of the Ashtadivyajalu had composed at least one Prabandha Kavyam. All of them had at least composed one Prabandha Kavyam, because Prabandha Kavyam was again a prominent literary form during the period of Sri Krishna Devaraya. Most of the Ashtadivyajalu were from the southern part of the present-day Andhra Pradesh state. Because most of them were from the places in and around Rayalaseema, Guntur, all those areas, Prakasham district, Guntur area, Tenali also, so all those areas were again the areas where these Ashtadivyajalus lived. Ashtadivyajalu, okay, or otherwise Ashtadivyajas. Ashtadivyajas is again the English coinage, the English plural of Ashtadivyajalu. Allasani. So now let's come to Allasani Peddana. He was a poet in the court of Sri Krishna Devaraya. He was an emperor of the Vijayanagara Empire who reigned from 1509 to 1529. So he was ranked actually. He was ranked as the foremost of the Ashtadivyajalu. The title for the group of 8 poets in the court of the emperor Krishna Devaraya. So that is again Ashtadivyajalu means the title for the group of 8 poets in the court of Emperor Krishna Devaraya. I have already explained that in the previous slides. So that is what we can have. And about the birthplace of Allasani Peddana, there are differences of opinion. According to some sources, it is mentioned that he was a native of Peddana of the present Prakasham district, which is near Sri Saibam. And he was a native of Somandapalli near Anantapur. He later moved to Peddanapadu, a small village located at 5 km from Yeragunpallu on Yeragunpallu-Vempalli Road in Kadapa district. So there is again an Agraharam given by Krishna Devaraya. So these are some of the differences of opinion about the place of birth of Allasani Peddana. We are not able to trace the place of birth of Allasani Peddana correctly. So this information I got from Wikipedia. And so let's try to know more about Allasani Peddana. He was called Andhra Kavita Pidamaha. People used to call him the grandfather of Telugu poetry. That means that was again the title given by conferred on him by Sri Krishna Devaraya. And Sri Krishna Devaraya gave him Ganda Penderamu, that was called the hero's anklet. This Ganda Penderamu was tied on his left foot. It bore the images of all rival poets. That is, as he was walking, he could kick the heads of all the rival poets. So it was a kind of symbolic representation of stating that he was defeating all the rival poets and he could surpass all of them. So that was the meaning of this hero's anklet. Okay? In a way, symbolically, he was kicking off all the rival poets. So he was again granted by Sri Krishna Devaraya. And we don't know about many works of Allasani Peddana. He might have written other works, but only one great work of Allasani Peddana has survived, that is Mani Charitramu. Definitely he might have written, but we have now only Mani Charitramu. Even this Mani Charitramu is also a Prabandha. I have already told you this Prabandha, this literary form was very prominent in the period, so this is also a Prabandha. And Mani Charitramu tells the story of the birth of Swarojisha Manu. That is the second of the 14 Manus. might have actually heard about Manus in mythology. The first Manu Swayambhu Manu, the second Manu Swarojisha Manu. So this is about the story of the birth of Swarojisha Manu. This Manu Charitramu. This is what is focused on in his Manu Charitramu that Prabandha Karnavas. Manu, it refers to the archetypal man or to the first man. You might have heard of Manu Smriti, the one who actually wrote the codes and codes, rules and regulations about patriarchal system, caste system, and all those things can be found in Manu Smriti. So anyway, Manu refers to the first man. So anyway, this story of Swarojisha Manu that is found in Markandeya Purana. Markandeya Purana is one of the 18 major Puranas. In this Purana, we can find the story. And here we can see the story of Pravarakya. Okay, so that is what is shown in the poem you have to study. The Brahman means the person. That is the story of Pravarakya and Varutiri. And there are some legends about Allasani Peddana. The most important legend was that the emperor himself lifted and bore the way to the palanquin in which Peddana was seated. I shall read some lines for you. So from those lines also you can understand that. And so there was a strong bond of relationship between Allasani Peddana and Sri Krishna Devaraya. There was so much of intimacy and love between the poet and the patron. He was bestowed with the Kanagabhishekam by the king. There was again another legend because it is not easy for us to believe that that the emperor himself lifted Peddana. So that is very difficult for us to believe. That is why it is mentioned that legend. It was a legend. He was the only poet who had the privilege of mounting the royal elephant.
It's 4 o'clock.
That is mentioned here. On the demise of Sri Krishna Devaraya, the poet Peddana expressed his profound sorrows, telling that I became a living dead by not going to heaven along with the Sri Krishna Devaraya. In the poem you have to study, I have already circulated the poem in the class. So in that one itself we can see a particular section which speaks about these legends. So in page 242 we can see that. I'm just reading that for you. When he would see me on the street, he would halt his elephant and help me up with his own hand. For the mere asking, he gave me villages like Kolkata in any region. On the day I dedicated my story of Manu to him, he himself carried the palanquin where I was seated. He told me I alone was worthy to bear the anklet of a triumphant poet, and it was he who tied it on my foot. He called me master of Telugu poetry, Allasani Peddana, king of poets. So we can see the strong relationship between Krishna Devaraya and Allasani Peddana in the following lines. Now Krishnadaya has died and I couldn't go with him to heaven. I stay on like the living dead. So in these lines itself we can find the reference to this legend that he was carried in the palanquin and he himself carried the palanquin. Okay, that means Sri Krishna Devaraya himself carried the palanquin in which Allasani Peddana was seated, and he tied the Ganda Penderamu also on his foot. He is the one who called him the master of Telugu poetry, Andhra Kavita Pitamaha. So that was also granted to him. That title was conferred on him by Sri Krishna Devaraya. So all those things are clear in these lines. Anyway, this is the model of excellence, so paragon for the relationship between the poet and the patron. And so let's try to know a few features of Allasani Peddana's poetry. Allasani Peddana's poetry poems are highly lyrical. He used words with precision. He did not use any word necessarily. All the words were in correct place. Even all the syllables were also in correct place. So one syllable could not be replaced with another syllable. That was the way he constructed his poems. So that was a kind of artful construction only. It's against the thought that the poetry is again overflow of powerful feelings. Okay, so that kind of a thing we don't find. It is again artistically and deliberately created. And we can find a number of realistic description of passages in his poetry. And as you study the poem, you can come across that. And another thing we can find in his poems is again the presence of erotic elements. So is again when you are going to study the Brahmin meets the courtesan, you can study erotic elements embedded in the poem, because it speaks about attraction of Varudiri for Pravaragya. So that is actually the context of the poem. So that you can find in the poem. And he used, like other Telugu poets, conventional images. So those conventional images could be found in his poem. And before ending up this lecture, I would like to speak a few things about the poem you have to study. This is again, the poem you have to study is The Brahmin Meets the Courtesan. I have already told you. And this is the story of Pravaragya. You might have heard of Pravaragya. Pravaragya was a Brahmin, and he was living by the side of a river, and he was doing all rituals, everything carefully, and he was very eager to visit different places. He wanted to travel, he wanted to explore. So that kind of request actually he had. So he used to treat all the guests with good hospitality. So he was well known for that hospitality. So again, welcoming Atithis, okay? So welcoming Atithis and treating the Atithis in again the SRN way. You might have heard of the saying Atithi Devo Bhava, okay? In that way only he treated these Atithis. And one day a sage came to his house, and the sage was pleased with the this man's, that is Pravaragya's treatment. And the sage understood, the sage got to know about the desire of Pravaragya, that he wanted to explore, he wanted to go to different places. So he had a particular kind of ointment, okay? So he just gave him an ointment, so which was prepared from some kind of herbs. So this ointment would actually take him to different places. That was the benefit of that ointment. Okay, so this ointment, or this lepana, it was smeared on his feet. So he, Pravaragya, he actually applied this ointment on his feet, and he, in a fraction of a second, okay, he went to the Himalayas. So when he went to the Himalayas, he was fascinated with the beauty of the stone-clad mountains. Okay, he was just looking at the beauty of the vegetation there, the forest there. So he was very happy with all those things. He was happy with the caves there, and he was actually wandering to different places in the Himalayas. As he kept on moving, he forgot to see that his ointment was still there on his feet. So what happened was that this ointment that was on his feet got washed away. So when it was washed away, he did not have any way to come back. So now he is in the Himalayas, and he has to come back. So what is the way for him to come back? So he was very much upset with that, and he did not find anybody there. He started moving around, and as he was moving around, he happened to see a beautiful woman, that is Varudini. Okay, Varudini is again the celestial beauty or Apsaras, so the daughter of Menaka. So this Varudini was attracted to Pravaragya at the very first sight itself, and she wanted this Pravaragya to fall in love with Varudini. She was desperately in love with the Pravaragya. But Pravaragya refused her, and Pravaragya wanted to come back to his home only. He refused her. This Varudini thought that she would die because of her love. And here, another Gandharva who happened to see the pain, okay, of Varudini, he came as Maya Pravarakya. This is one version of the story. He came as Maya Pravarakya, and they fell, that is, Varudini did not know that it was not actually Maya Pravarakya. So they had a physical union, and in that relationship, Manu was born. Okay, Swarojisha Manu was born. So that is again the mythological story related to the birth of Swarojisha Manu. You don't have to study the entire story in the poem that is described for you, but for your benefit, I am just narrated the story. So in the next class, I'll be taking the poem completely, and I've already given the poem to the class representative, and I hope that poem was circulated among the students. At least it was shared to all of you. So let's continue studying the poem in the next class. So students, stay safe at home, but keep on listening to the lectures. Okay, don't run away from that. So I just want you people to keep on listening to the lectures. So for the time being, I'm just stopping here. So students, bye.